this episode of Positive Takes, I want to talk about two recent movies I saw that I found equally delightful in different ways. The first being the Super Mario Brothers movie, and the second one isn't actually a video game adaptation, but given that it's influenced so many video games and there's been direct video games based on it, I think it's kind of an honorary mention, and that would be Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So, to talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie, I've seen a lot of people online sort of kicking this film or saying it's just a stupid kids film or this, that, and the other thing. And just to be clear, I'm not like a simp or anything for Illumination. I liked the first Despicable Me a decent amount. I don't really like any of the other ones. I thought the second one was incredibly bad, actually. I do like Sing 2 a little bit. I didn't really like the first one. And then even their upcoming movie, which is about ducks or something, didn't really look very good to me at all. So I'm hardly an Illumination mega fan or anything. I will say, so this movie was written by Matthew Fogel, who does have some credits that include the Lego Movie 2, and he also did write The Rise of Gru, another movie which I can't say I really cared for. So I know a lot of people going into this movie were already kind of negative on it, saying it's probably just going to be a dumb kids film and this, that, and the other thing, and it's going to be like the other Illumination films. I kind of went in a little more hopeful. I had seen the trailers. They all looked really good. If anything, they probably gave away a little too much. And then I think the other big thing going against this film was that Wreck-It Ralph had essentially made this movie years earlier. If you look at that movie, they're using original characters and all that, but Fix It Feel It Jr. is basically Mario, from Donkey Kong, and Ralph himself is obviously based on Donkey Kong. And then the second half of the film is essentially a riff off of Mario Kart. In a way, Disney already ate their lunch, in a sense. These were all challenges and hurdles that I'm sure Illumination had in trying to conceptualize what their movie would be. Another big complaint that I would say I agree with, but I think is way over-exaggerated, is the use of licensed music throughout this film. And, the way people talk about it, they make it sound like it's, the first Suicide Squad movie where every 2 seconds there's a different licensed song that's completely out of place and stupid. I didn't really find that to be the case in this film. There's basically like 5 big songs that I can think of. There's the Beastie Boys' No Sleep Till Brooklyn, a really obvious song, but I did think it fit well for the scene it was used in. There's Take On Me, which I thought was a really badly picked track, and I think they even had originally, so that's used in the scene with Donkey Kong, and I think they originally had a remix that you can find online of the Donkey Kong country themes, and I thought that would have been a lot better if they had used that one instead of this, really out of place song. And then, of course, we have I Need a Hero, which is used during the montage of Mario kind of trying to learn how to platform. I think the big thing about that is they had already used I Need a Hero in Shrek 2, when they have the big ending scene with the giant gingerbread man. So using it again here feels a little tacky, just in the sense that, why would you use a song that was already used in a prominent, big CGI film? But it worked perfectly well in that montage. And throughout the film, you also hear these amazing remixes of basically every Mario song ever. And something else I wanted to mention is I feel like a lot of people complaining about this film, for them, Mario was very much stuck in the 80s, the first Super Mario Brothers game, or even 3. That's what Mario means to them. Or maybe the Mario Brothers game with Donkey Kong and all that. Or, sorry, I'm confusing 2 different games. But, the first Mario Brothers game where you're in the tunnels taking out Koopas, and then Donkey Kong itself, which kind of introduced Mario, or Jumpman as he was known at the time. So I think for them, they really have this, reference to Mario that's kind of stuck in the past. Whereas for me and a lot of people that I know, Mario really came to life, or I guess really started to stand out around the time of Super Mario World. And then, of course, Mario 64 blew everyone's mind. And every game after that, Sunshine, Galaxy, and now we have Odyssey most recently. As well as, of course, I think the Mario Kart that you see in this movie is very referential to 8 specifically, and, every other Mario Kart. And, of course, the Donkey Kong design is kind of a melding of Donkey Kong Country, as well as the original design that you see on the side of the arcade cabinets that I think you see briefly at the beginning of this movie, with slightly different wording. So these are all things that I think people had in their minds going in. But I was really impressed, that specifically there's deep cuts to Mario 64. You see, characters from that game, King Babomb, King Boo, at the big wedding scene at the end. You see Peach's castle, and it's exactly that design from that game. And you also have, deep cuts from Super Mario 3D World with the clear tunnels that you go through when they first enter the Mushroom Kingdom, as well as a reference to Galaxy, clearly setting up a sequel around the midpoint of the movie. Princess Peach gazes up into the sky, saying she doesn't know where she came from, and briefly mentions that there's a lot of galaxies out there. So clearly there's going to be a sequel with maybe Rosalina, which would actually be really awesome, since that was one of the best games featuring Mario. So another big point of contention, I think, going into this movie was the voice actors selected. And I have to admit, when I first saw the list of actors chosen, I was kind of like, isn't this just like a who's who of who someone creative voice director would cast? But I will say they actually acquitted themselves very well throughout the movie, and I think the people who directed this movie were probably like Illumination, standards, whoever directed The Rise of Gru and all that. So I will say either the actors or, the voice directors or, whoever was coaching the performances did a really great job in actually having them sort of step out of their shell and give performances that kind of stood out more than, more than is typical, more than you might expect. So particular highlights, of course, people have talked about this to death already, but Jack Black was actually really good as King Bowser. I've seen complaints that he's just talking like Jack Black. I really don't think that was the case. I think he actually is doing amazing work to bring this character to life, particularly if you're familiar with this character from like any of the Mario and Luigi RPGs or some of the other earlier RPGs that have Bowser as a character who's not just like a kind of a static bad guy. I think Jack Black is probably a really big video game fan. I think I've even seen that he like has YouTube videos or streams Twitch or something like that, where he has his like bona fides. So I think he actually really knew and understood the character. And I love that he brought in, the piano playing. I will also say I wasn't that big a fan of the Peaches song. It is really catchy, but it's also really short. There's not much to it. He's just repeating the word peaches a bunch of times. I did like that they had a refrain of that. They repeat it later in the movie, and then they even reference it at the very end when he's shrunk down with the micro mushroom. It's another deep cut from the DS games. New Super Mario Brothers. So, the big uphill battle was, of course, Chris Pratt. There's been this big, campaign against Chris Pratt, for various reasons that I'm not really going to go into right now. But essentially, you had to kind of separate the actor from the, performance. And I actually have really enjoyed pretty much every movie Chris Pratt has done, or I should say his work in the MCU, and the Lego movie, of course, was really great. But he has done some other roles that are maybe more questionable. He more recently has been doing a lot of like stoic, sour, sort of sci-fi roles. I'm not really sure what's going on there. I haven't really been into any of those roles. But he is clearly a talented performer. He's very funny. He obviously came to fame with the Parks and Recreation show. So clearly he knows what he's doing. He is capable. And I think he actually did a pretty good job in this movie. Obviously, you couldn't really have the Charles Martinet throughout. It would have gotten really annoying. They do reference it at the very beginning of the movie with, this commercial that they make that's also referencing the Super Mario Brothers Super Hour, I think it was called. Super Show or something like that. But anyway, they have the song from that show to start the movie, and they have them talking in their classic, Mario and Luigi kind of, not racist, let's just say affectionate Italian stereotypes. And then they have them commenting, do you think we overdid the accents and all that in their sort of more normal speaking voices? But I did think Chris Pratt did a really good job. I would say, they probably have one too many Mamma Mia jokes where he just says Mamma Mia for some reason, or woohoo. So I think they did that maybe one too many times, but, when he did it, it was fine. I think Charlie Day actually did an incredible job as Luigi. He really brought that character to life, and I know that Luigi's kind of a fan favorite for a lot of people, including some people I know. So I think he did a really great job, and maybe too good a job, because you do kind of miss him a lot when he disappears for basically 80% of the movie, and you have to wonder, maybe there was a subplot originally that cut out for pacing reasons, because they basically set him up, he's trapped in, Well, you see him two different times. First, he's in a very much like Luigi's Mansion setting when he first comes out of the Mushroom Kingdom. You know, they're kind of separated, like in Thor Ragnarok or something, like on the Rainbow Bridge. So Luigi ends up in one tunnel, and Mario ends up in the other one. And Luigi kind of gets spit out in this like basically Luigi's Mansion setting. So there's lots of little like musical references, and even having Luigi say Mario like he does in that game. So that's all really good stuff. You get a brief tease of the Shy Guys, and then they disappear again until I think the end of the movie. So I would have liked a lot more of that stuff. Maybe like 5 to 10 more minutes of Luigi stuff, of him maybe like he could have broken out in the castle and maybe like started a little fomented a little resistance from within with the other prisoners. You know, something to do. And obviously the reason for that is typically, that would be the Princess Peach role, to be the prisoner and just be locked up for the entire game or movie or whatever. So they obviously want to avoid that for clear, patriarchal, feminist reasons. So, it didn't really bother me from that point of view, but basically I just wanted to see more Charlie Day. And obviously they'll set him up for a spin-off now that this movie's made so much money, like billions of dollars. And I very much welcome that. I'd love to see a Luigi's Mansion movie, or just, a much expanded role in a sequel, or whatever sort of thing. So I think the start of this movie, we have two starts, really. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz setup in a way, because you have a very, like, normal, Brooklyn-esque setting. And we see that Mario and Luigi aren't the favorites of their parents. They show their entire family, which is kind of fun, since we've never seen that or had that implied in the games. Essentially we see not Luigi's Mansion. So you see Yoshi's Island, where they're just babies being carried by storks. So we have no idea who their parents or broader family members are. So that was a nice bit of imagination and creativity to bring them into the role. You have a reference to Spike, and maybe that they worked at a construction company, which is another deep-cut video game reference. And I will say, a lot of this movie is just, like, references, and I would say that would be annoying, and, we see that a lot in the MCU films, or the Star Wars films, or TV shows, where they're just doing something to reference it. But in this case, I think the writers and everyone involved, I know Shigeru Miyamoto was actually personally involved, it seems they have a deep affection and understanding of the source material. So it actually kind of worked for me in this case, in this specific instance of doing that. Whereas, again, in other instances, it would be annoying. But in this case, I was kind of there for every musical reference to the different themes, to all the, like, visual references to different enemies. Very early when Mario arrives, you see a bunch of different enemy types that you've seen throughout the games, in some of the more recent games, like Galaxy and Odyssey. So yeah, we have a very basic setup of, like, they think their dad isn't proud of them, and this, that, and the other thing. And this is something that I would also complain about, that I've seen in other reviews, which is just that, Luigi and Mario's relationship is very basic. And basically the idea is that Mario always is there to take care of Luigi, and you have that reference again in a very jarring sort of flashback, where you see that on the schoolyard, they had the same exact relationship, where I think Luigi's just getting picked on, possibly by Baby Spike, I'm not sure about that, and then Mario just, like, stands up for him. That actually did affect me emotionally, just because it kind of reminded me of my own relationship with my brother. Apparently I did the exact same thing when we were on preschool or something like that. Like, someone would be picking on him and I'd stand up for him. So I actually thought that was more affecting than all of Onward, ironically, the other Chris Pratt brother movie. So yeah, the basic is very the setup is very basic, and I don't think there's that much that's great about it. You have this whole thing on their first job where there's this dog that just has a beef to pick with them, and that was kind of over the top, reminded me of The Secret Life of Pets or the other Illumination films. It was fine, but, it did make me feel a little bit like, I don't know, worried. And then very quickly, they discover there's a secret pipe. There's a big emergency in Brooklyn. And there's a nice little visual reference where Mario is actually playing an NES and he's playing Kid Icarus. So it kind of makes you wonder, are they ever going to do a Kid Icarus movie? How would that work now? Not that they would, since that's a very unpopular character and series. So eventually they have to realize that they're trying to save Brooklyn from flooding. So they go underground and discover these pipes. It's very much a Mario Brothers, the original game setup of discovering the different pipes. So eventually they discover this hidden area, and maybe they'll get more explanation if there's a sequel, which obviously there will be. So they go through the tunnel and they end up in the Mushroom Kingdom. They get separated, as I mentioned previously, and Luigi gets captured by Bowser and the Shy Guys and all that. And then Mario ends up in the Mushroom Kingdom, and he quickly runs into Toad, who's voiced by Keegan-Michael Key. Again, I thought he did a really good job. You know, he wasn't just doing his voice; he was like pitching it to sound like Toad from the games. So I thought that was also a really good performance. And he doesn't get annoying, and he's always quite funny throughout the adventure. And it's very much that Wizard of Oz effect, where now you're plunged into this like fantasy world, and you're seeing all this amazing sights, and it's like kind of blowing your mind. I wish I had seen this in 3D. I didn't, but I think it would have worked really well in 3D. And you get lots of nice references. Like there's a used salesman. What am I trying to say? It's like a Goodwill secondhand store or whatever, and someone's like buying a cartridge, and the salesman's like, "Don't blow into the cartridge" or something like that. Which is obviously a reference to the actual game cartridges that people would blow into and ruin. And lots of just like really cool visuals, you know, building up the Mushroom Kingdom. You know, we haven't really seen it that much aside from like some of the Paper Mario RPGs or Mario and Luigi games. So it is just nice to see it fully fleshed out. Again, a lot of people complaining about them. I'm just like, what exactly were you expecting? Like, this is kind of what I wanted and was expecting. You know, ever since there was the 90s Mario Brothers movie, which I will say I do actually like a fair bit. You know, it's kind of a noble failure in my mind. You know, it's just like so crazy not there, but it has nothing to do with Mario. So just seeing this movie, which accurately brings all those elements from the Mario games, was kind of enough for me in a way. So we are introduced to Bowser and his whole thing, and we have Kamek. I was going to say Lakitu, but that's obviously a different character. And Kamek is voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. Again, I would have liked to see a little more from him. I thought he did a really good job, but, you know, that's not much of a character, really. It's just kind of the underling for Bowser. What else? So we're quickly introduced to Princess Peach. Toad takes Mario to meet her, and they have a whole interaction. It is a little bit weird, you know, they kind of went over the top of, like, making her so skilled and so experienced. So essentially, she needs to go on an adventure to, Mario tells her that Bowser seems to be invading, and then they have to go on a little adventure to the Donkey Kong universe to recruit some fighters to help them out. And basically, I should also mention that when they arrive to the castle, there's a little reference to, like, the princess in another castle, which is kind of dumb. I didn't really care for that joke either. But yeah, eventually they do a training course montage, which I referenced before, and they, you know, explain what the power-ups are, because it's kind of like, you know, if you haven't played the games or any of that stuff, then how would you know what any of that stuff is? So they just explain that it kind of, like, boosts you up. You see Mario get bigger and get smaller and all that stuff, and it is just a very nice, you know, whenever they actually do the platforming, it's really great. You know, there's a sequence at the beginning where Mario decides to take a shortcut, kind of like in those Edgar Wright films, and he's just like doing the platforming through a construction site, which is really nicely animated, and that's when they do the Beastie Boys song. And then they do it again here, with Mario learning the ropes, with this nice running gag about this piranha plant eating him when he thinks he's like completed the course. Again, that's where they use the "I Need a Hero," and that's, you know, it's whatever. Again, I always would have just preferred the cut where they just used the orchestrated music, which again I think was amazingly done. I'd have to look up who composed all that music, but Brian Tyler, who's really talented and does a lot of really good soundtracks, including for the MCU. So yeah, all the orchestrated stuff itself is excellent. So yeah, they do the training montage and with lots of nice references to different platforming stuff. And then eventually they get spit out, and they end up going to the Donkey Kong country. I will say this is kind of a little bit where the film didn't lose me, but it was a little like, you know, slowing down a little bit, and, you know, I wasn't as engaged by it. I don't know if they really needed to have all the Donkey Kong stuff in this movie. They probably could have saved that for a follow-up sequel. And I will also say that I did like Seth Rogen, but he was kind of just doing his voice, and, you know, was the same kind of setup of, you know, my dad isn't impressed by me. I will also say they have Fred Armisen as the original Donkey Kong, and it did very much feel like he was phoning it in, to the point where I actually thought it was Nick Kroll originally, you know, like doing his old man character. But apparently it's Fred Armisen doing like a very, you know, whatever job. He was kind of doing the voice acting I think people feared when they originally heard about this. And they just set up that, essentially the donkey, I don't know, I keep saying donkeys. Essentially, the apes are the ones who build all the carts that you see in Mario Kart. So it's just a setup to get them onto the Rainbow Road to drive to try to stop Bowser from all his machinations. Uh, so just a lot of sort of plot contrivances. So this is the part of the film that I probably was the least impressed by. I will also say, I did really like the Mario Kart sequence. It kind of felt like Mad Max, one of those things. But it did kind of go over the top and a little long. So, they probably could have, like, condensed it and made it a little less over the top and less, like, I don't know how to say it, just, like, over the top kiddie action stuff. But it was just nice kind of seeing, like, sort of a Mad Max riff of Mario Kart, which is, of course, awesome. And then at the very end, there's a blue shell reference, which I think they could have just referenced visually instead of having a Koopa actually say, blue shell or whatever happens in the movie. So at that point, the characters get separated, and Toad and Peach go back to the Mushroom Kingdom to try to fend off Bowser. And Mario and Donkey Kong kind of land in the water under the bridge. Red Hot Chili Peppers, and that's where they get swallowed by an eel. Again, this sequence was kind of like unnecessary, but it did like allow for a little bit of character building. I would just say like all these little nice moments, instead of just having like 2 seconds of it, just like expand upon it a little bit and go a little bit further, a little bit deeper. Just because these are kid films doesn't mean you can't have like some deeper emotionality and deeper like character stuff. So I would have liked to see a little more of that. Instead of like always just going for the easy reference or the easy jokes. So yeah, that basically gets us to the third act, which is where they all end up back in the Mushroom Kingdom, and Bowser has this like big flying fortress. And I didn't even mention, like, at the beginning of the film, there's this very brief thing with the penguins that you see in the N64 games and other games. I guess the reason I forgot all about that is because they immediately put a Kill Bill sting on over that, and it kind of makes you worried again, being like, why would they use this song from like an extremely violent and gory movie for this kid's films? Like, who is that reference for exactly? But I could have done without that too. So yeah, he has this flying fortress that he uses to, basically try to take over these kingdoms. And meanwhile, Luigi and the other prisoners, and I intentionally didn't even reference the what's it called? The star, not a Lulu, but something like that. A Luma. The little Luma that's like very goth and like obsessed with death and all that stuff. Another joke that was like, it's okay, but kind of over the top and not really for me, I don't think. So yeah, it's just a big third act climax where Peach is fighting from the top, and then Mario and Donkey Kong have to, power up and fight their way all the way up to the castle. And that's exactly what you want to see in a Mario movie. That's where like all the big action beats come, the platforming stuff. And it was actually a really nicely just like set up, from the standpoint of a CGI film. It's just like a very nicely staged and acted out moments, because you basically have them tracking sideways, doing all these stuff from the game, in multiple planes. Again, this would have been amazing in 3D. Doing all this action stuff that if you hear they're making a Mario Brothers movie, this is basically what would leap into your mind of what they're probably going to do. So yeah, all that stuff was really great. Really entertaining. Again, if you haven't played the games, if you're not a fan, maybe you would be like, who cares? But, as a fan, as somebody who's played basically all these games, not 100% of them or anything, but I thought all that was really awesome and cool to see on screen in a big theater with, really great audio. There was one bit at the end here that I also didn't care for. So basically, Bowser, having been defeated, sends off a big, bullet bill bomb that somehow Mario ends up using to go into one of the tunnels back to Manhattan and Brooklyn and all that, New York essentially. And then they have to do like a million 9/11s thing where like the bomb goes off and actually destroys this significant portion. And like, there's, even in a kid's film, there's no way that like a bunch of people didn't just die. So it's like, that's kind of weird to do. Like, why do we have to have a 9/11 reference in a kid's film that was, I will say there's like a lot of violence in this movie too, just like people slapping each other and punching and all that stuff. Particularly in the Donkey Kong, Mario has to fight Donkey Kong and earn the cat power up and all that. And I could have done with a little bit less of that, again, because your target audience is basically kids. Like, why do we need to have a bunch of like melee? This isn't a Smash Brothers movie, basically, so why do we have to have like a bunch of melee fighting? I would maybe lessen some of that in the sequel, but they probably won't. They'll probably have more of it. But yeah, so essentially they end up back in New York, so that Luigi and Mario can impress their father, basically. Like, that's the whole reason for that. And that is where they have a really good reference to kind of the Starman thing. They get a star, which is the big power-up that Bowser has been coveting this whole film. And that's where you have the really great, like, dun 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 dun, dun Mario star music. So that's all really awesome. And you have this nice bit where Luigi finds his bravery and uses, like, a manhole cover to prevent Bowser's flame breath from killing Mario. Again, another weird thing is that Mario really gets beaten up by Bowser, and he ends up back in the, like, I think it was the pizza place, I guess. And he's like all like, has black eyes and like puffy, and it's like, that seems a little much for a kid's film. I don't know if I would have gone that extreme with it. But yeah, essentially they end up defeating Bowser by getting him to consume a micro mushroom, making him really small, and then, trap him in a bottle so that they have a pet turtle, as was referenced earlier in the movie. So yeah, that's us fun. We have another reference to the song. We see now that their business is booming and that they are able to freely travel back and forth to the Mushroom Kingdom and have kind of set up shop in the Mushroom Kingdom itself. This is all clear setup for a sequel. You briefly see Yoshi's, crossing a stream as sort of a reference, to the Yoshi dinosaur islands and all that. And at the very end, after all the credits, you do see a Yoshi egg crack open, clearly setting up, there's going to be a big actor playing a Yoshi. I've never been one of these people that's like, I'm so impressed by the big name actors that you get to play, different characters in these kids' films. I don't know who that's for, again. I don't know who that's impressing. I much preferred, like, the Pixar method originally, and then even before that, casting actual voice actors who that's their whole trade. But whatever, it is what it is. There's no going back, really. Okay, so that's kind of my review. The things I liked, the things I didn't like. Again, I was overwhelmingly, like, kind of positive on this movie. Just the whole vibe, the tone. It clearly captures that feel of playing a Mario game and hopefully inspires people to go off and play some of these games, which I'm sure Nintendo wouldn't be mad about either, getting some boost to their sales. And I hope that actually inspires them to make some of these games more readily available. Instead of that Mario All-Star Pack or whatever it was, maybe remaster some of these games. I'd love to see a remastered Sunshine, a remastered Galaxy 2-pack, all this stuff that they should have done properly the first time, especially with the success of some of these other remasters that have been coming out recently, like the Metroid Prime remaster. Hopefully they're able to do something to tie in more to this game movie, and then maybe release a new game, Odyssey 2 or whatever it is. So yeah, I thought the voice acting was on point. The orchestrated music is great. I would do an edit where they take out all the licensed music entirely, because it's kind of pointless and bad, as a lot of people alluded to, even though, it really wasn't that much. It was like 5 different songs briefly featured. I would maybe retool Anya Taylor-Joy's character a little bit, which they're probably going to do in the sequel if it's more Galaxy-inspired. And again, if the sequel is like all Galaxy references, again, I'd be there for that too, because that's a great 2-part series. So yeah, I definitely want to see more Luigi, more Charlie Day. Hopefully Donkey Kong gets spun off into his own movie, because I don't really think any of that stuff fit in here. I did like, you briefly see all the other characters in the country. You see Diddy and Dixie and all the rest. Yeah, so I think they only have room to improve. Hopefully they don't just get lazy and complacent. This being Illumination, that would be a worry, looking at some of their other sequels. And hopefully Shigeru Miyamoto is still involved, and some of the other people at Nintendo who can kind of take some of this criticism to heart and actually improve and make an even better product, instead of, kind of just getting lazy and being like, okay, they'll give us another $1 million if we just do the exact same thing again. We'll see. Maybe the sequel could even be a musical. That'd actually be pretty awesome, in my opinion. I don't know if Chris Pratt can sing, or any other ones, but we can see. Okay, so I definitely recommend checking this out. I think it's going to hit home video really soon, so you don't even have to go to the theaters. I think it's probably amazing in 3D. I didn't see it in that format, but I kind of regret that. The soundtrack's amazing, and everything else I already said. So yeah, again, for me, this movie worked more than it didn't, and I'll keep talking about Dungeons and Dragons in my sequel to this video. All right, for more content, make sure to follow, subscribe, and like to Positive Takes.